Good afternoon, and welcome to the 2021 Missouri A&OER Symposium. This is the 1 o'clock session presentation, The Role of Sharing in Promoting OER. My name is Scott Curtis, and I will be your session moderator. Our presenter today is Helena Marvin. Helena is the Institutional Repository Librarian at the University of Missouri-St. Louis. She is an OER coordinator and OER Commons group administrator. A few logistical things. A note on yesterday's sessions. Due to technical issues on Thursday, we were not able to gather feedback on every session. If you attended a session and were unable to give feedback, please go back into that session, then leave again. When you leave the session this time, you should be promoted to give feedback. We apologize for any inconvenience this may cause. Live captioning is available during this presentation. Please find the link located under the Handouts tab. I will also make that link available in the discussion forum, and I am doing that now. This session will be recorded and provided within this event portal following the symposium. As a reminder, all attendees should keep their login credentials to have access to all the conference material in the portal for 6 months. A copy of the PowerPoint presentation will be provided under the Handouts tab after the presentation. You may enter your questions in the discussion chat or the live Q&A windows. Helena will be addressing questions throughout her talk. We will monitor the live Q&A and discussion and ask those questions as the flow of the presentation allows. Our speaker will be asking some poll questions throughout the session. You will be able to participate in those under the Polls tab. If you have any technical issues, the MEC staff are behind the scenes and available to provide support. Be sure to reach out through the live support button. And now, without further ado, our speaker, Helena Marvin.
Hello, and welcome to the Role of Sharing in Promoting OER. So I was thrilled at the theme for this conference because sharing is caring, and without sharing, how do you collaborate? How do you adapt? How do you get the resources for equity out in the world? So I'm excited to tell you all about sharing. I've also given you a poll asking how you feel about polls. I am thrilled to see someone does not like polls and that there are librarians and designers here attending my talk. So who am I? I am Helena Marvin. I am the OER coordinator, institutional repository librarian, and a reference librarian at the Institutional Repository Library at UMSL, the University of Missouri-St. Louis. So my introduction to open was with open source software, Linux, open source Linux, various browsers, all sorts of technology. And then more professionally, I work with open access articles and open data and open educational resources. So I'm a big fan of the various kinds of open and open as a paradigm. So speaking of paradigms, currently there is a pyramid where students give money to publishers who give them textbooks. And I am thrilled to talk a bit more about how the Creative Commons can make a funnel of OERs that can go to both students and to teachers. So in the traditional, I'm going to talk a little bit about the traditional commercial model and the other model. Oh, wait, I am curious. What was your introduction to the world of open? I'm going to end that other one where it looks like we do have a teacher, a designer, some librarians, and someone who doesn't like polls. Wonderful. So I think you can now see those results. Yeah. So the next poll is, what was your first introduction to open? Was it OER? Was it open access? Was it open source tech? Was it open data? Was it open table for restaurant reservations? That is a different sort of open, but it's all about access. So the traditional commercial model is the publisher will hire an author to create a textbook. That created textbooks has a copyright held by the publisher, and then there's a whole distribution network that publishers have to get their books out there. In the open model, I want to talk about that blue arrow. I want to talk about how do we get open out to people, because I'm interested. So it looks like a number of you, OERs was your introduction to open. Some of you, open access, and just a few of you, open source software. That was my start, and I remain adamant about open source technologies. Let's get this back. There is a big world of Creative Commons because Creative Commons isn't all about OER. It's also about those other open resources. It's a license. So if we're looking at where on the big wide web do we find various open things, I'm going to touch on 3: the OER Commons, the Open Textbook Library, and briefly on the Internet Archive. So, but I'm going to start at home. I'm going to start at the Institutional Repository Library of UMSL. So I'm starting there because that's where I have some juicy data, and just to give you a feel for what I've been up to at UMSL. In URL, which is what I call the Institutional Repository Library, URL has 24 OER works that are shared. I am curious. Let's go backwards one slide. Which of these have you used with OER? Have you been to the OER Commons? Have you used the Open Textbook Library, the Internet Archive, GitHub? I'm very curious what folks have gotten to use, and if there are other spaces you've used online that aren't in here, go ahead and add that to the discussion board. These are all spaces for promoting, for sharing OER. I'm going to talk about mine first, which is not an open space. It is for the UMSL community. We have 24 works that we are rehosting or linking out to that have been used, open works, open educational resources that have been used by professors at UMSL. There are 5 works which are library published, and I will talk a bit about how these works are getting used by the world, because the point of our institutional repository is to share works. So folks all over the world, this is specifically for our OER collection. All over the world, folks are downloading these materials. So of those 24 works, we've had about 41,000 downloads, and you might think, oh, I bet that's evenly distributed between republished, reshared OERs and those library published ones. You would be wrong. 38,000 of the downloads we've had are from our library published OERs, from things that we put together. Judy, who's done 2 talks, I recommend both of them. One of them in particular, which is going to be my example work, is an introduction to psychological statistics. This is a very popular work. It has, of our 38,000 downloads, it has about 34. So this really kind of skews how I thought downloads were going to work, but I'll get more into it. Folks are, part of why I'm using URL's data is because I have a little more granularity. This is who has, where folks came from to find that specific psychological statistic book. They came from OpenUMN. That's the Open Textbook Library, which which it looks like 31% of you have visited the Open Textbook Library. 33% of you have used the OER Commons, 31% the Internet Archive, and 6% GitHub. Yay, GitHub! Open source technology all the way. In addition to the open textbook library, folks have found it through Google. Folks have also gotten to it from Blackboard. So down at the bottom, there's a few Blackboard links, so you can see what schools are probably using this as a textbook or in their classes. So there's a difference between hosting and promoting. It's related, but not quite the same thing. Hosting is when you put the OER files online, the URL where it can be found. There's no login required to get to these things. So Canvas is not an OER host. It's a learning management system, which is great, but you can't really share it without being trapped in that platform. Promotion is when you share the OER, when you're linking to it. It's about distribution and getting people to find it. So again, we're in this wide world of where do you find OERs. I'm going to let you see that poll and give you another one. Have you used the OER Commons? I'm curious. Let me know. That is our first stop, the OER Commons. So the OER Commons is a very cool site. You can find, discover, and host materials on it. To speak to the hosting, that's kind of this open author tool. It's very limited, but it can be useful for small modules. Those works are WYSIWYG kind of based, so it's not great for like interactive. You can't really build on stuff, and it's not a tool for producing like a PDF of the whole thing. But there you have it. So in addition to the OER Commons, or inside of the OER Commons, there are OER hubs and OER groups. So hubs is this like paid for support tier. Mobius has a hub, and UMSL has a group inside of that hub. And that group is something I run. So I'm going to say, have you seen OER Commons groups before? I'm just curious. So when I asked if you'd used the OER Commons, 44% of you said yes, 11% of you said yes, and you have an account. 22 said yes, I've used it to share OERs, very cool. And 22% of you said nope. So to the 22% who've not checked out the OER Commons, I highly recommend it. And when it comes to OER groups, part of what's great about that is groups are free and you can use it to highlight. So I have our OER collection in URL, but I also have it reflected in the OER Commons. So this is a place that I envision potential UMSL folks coming to, and I want to not just show them OER works that have been adopted or adapted at UMSL. So our adapted works are those library published works. Not all 5 are in here. One of them is still pending. I should look into why. Anyway, the OER adopted works are also sharing out stuff people are using on campus. And in addition to that, I also have some about OERs, so they can go and look at different things. So this is kind of a nice landing page, and it's free to have a group. So if you want a group to help promote, and it doesn't have to be a university, but it's an interesting tool. There you have it. One of the works that has been shared on it is my example work, An Introduction to Psychological Statistics. So from the OER Commons, there's the information I added is the link to it, which pops it over to URL. So it's referring you to another place as opposed to hosting it here. And down in that corner area, I think I'm gonna see if I can use a pointer here and here. By adding this to the OER Commons, it got reviewed by the OER Commons folk, and I also added it to the open textbook library. So I'll talk about what it means to add a work to to submit a work to the open textbook library. That's this one. I'm going to go ahead and end our last poll. Boy, I hope you liked polls. The next one is the open textbook library. So who among you have used the open textbook library? It is referatory, meaning nothing is hosted at the open textbook library. It shows works that are hosted elsewhere. It's an incredible resource because folks do reviews on it, faculty teaching folks, and you can see how they are interested. So looking at this from the point of view of you as someone who is wanting to promote an OER, how do you do that? Like, how do you get an OER into the open textbook library? It's not too hard. It is at open textbooks/submit. The URL is up in the corner. You submit the book title and the link to the book. The open textbook library is a referatory, so they don't host things, they link out to them. The criteria you commit to, that you say, this thing I have looked at, all of the content is open, the images are open. It can either be GNU or Commons. GNU is an open license that is more from the open source, open technology community. The Creative Commons is what a lot of people think of for OERs, but CC no derivatives is not OER. I'm going to get to that just a little bit later. So CC BY is the recommended open Creative Commons license. It needs to be a whole textbook in a portable file, meaning something that people can download. It should be used at a place of higher education or affiliated, and you have to say it's original, it's not derivative. Or if it is derivative, that it is like a reimagining in a new little corner. That's the case for the psychological statistics textbook. It was taken, so the OpenStax, which is which is a big player in the OER field, has this incredibly long statistics book, and it was kind of shaved down to what is relevant for folks in the psychological sciences. So it is a derivative work, but it was changed in a significant enough way that it is relevant to this like new profession. So that's pretty cool. You also need to tell them about you. In my case, I am Helena Marvin, and I am at UMSL, and UMSL is my institution, and anything else I want to say or include, just so they know. So that's how you add a book to the open textbook library. It looks like 78% of you have found OERs in the open textbook library, and 22% of you have not checked it out. So I highly recommend, well, or you did and you didn't find any OERs. It's full of OERs, so I hope you go and check it out. I will go ahead and end that one and take a drink of water to slow myself down at least a second. The next and kind of final stop on our exploration is archive.org. So this I'm very interested in. Have you been to archive.org? Have you used the Wayback Machine to see the history of the internet? You can see past versions of web pages. Have you gone on it to play video games? It has a fantastic collection of video games you can play right in the browser. Have you used it for OERs? Have you used it and didn't realize it had OERs? Have you used it for research? Have you never used it? Are you morally opposed to archive.org? I'm a huge fan of archive.org. I went to a talk by the founder of it, and it was phenomenal. The Internet Archive does have an OER collection, and they have what's called community text, and you can upload to it. So if I didn't have URL, I would upload to archive.org. I can also upload to archive.org in addition to uploading to URL. So this is the Internet Archive at archive.org. And it looks like 35% of you have used the Wayback Machine. Very cool. 18% of you didn't know it had OERs in it. 18% of you have used it for educational resources or for research. So I'll let you see those results now. And yeah, archive.org has been fantastic in the pandemic. They've been really helpful at helping folks find the books they need to a large extent. So I'm a big fan of the archive.org. And when you're posting into it, they're kind of much more streamlined about their requirements. Page URL is what they generate for your thing. So you go to upload a file. I just uploaded an example and I didn't keep going with it. I need to provide the title. It will provide the URL, a description, subject tags, the creators of the work, the date, the collection, community texts, I think is the main place you put stuff, but there are other collections. I'm a little murky on that. I'm not a Internet Archive expert. I'm just a huge fan. You can also just test items. If you do a test item, it will delete itself after 30 days. That can be really useful for getting to know the platform. You say what language it is and what license they are. This question of what are the licenses on your work can be kind of daunting. So I want to get into what can be shared and how do I know if it is open. That's one of the big stopping points for people promoting OERs is, am I sure this is an OER? So have you ever been afraid to share an OER because you didn't know if it was really open? This is my question to you. So unless the copyright is yours, you can't cut the leash. Only the creator can. So what's great is this picture of a puppy on a leash is in the public domain. So I can use this without giving attribution to the creator. It has been freed. So I want you to keep this in mind. If the copyright isn't yours, you can't cut the leash. So from my question, I said, have you ever been afraid to share an OER because you didn't know if it was really open? About half of you have not shared an OER, but a third of you have no fear about sharing it. 12% of you have checked if your OERs were really open, and 6% of you just shared your OERs and did not, you had the fear, is it really open? How do I know? But you shared it anyway. So that is great for all of you. I will go ahead, or 5% of you have shared it anyway. I think I can leave that up for a second in case there's any more answers. I want to make sure there are 3 things I want distinctly understood. Fair use is what lets teachers use copyrighted materials in their class. So you're only supposed to use a little bit of fair use, not a lot of shared use. There's lots of fair use rules, and I am not a lawyer. So fair use, it is real helpful, it is real complicated. If you don't have ownership, if you don't have the copyright to something, you have no right to apply a license to it, with the exception of something that's in the public domain. You can apply licenses to that, but it also gets a little fuzzy. So we have public domain, open licenses, and all rights reserved. Copyright is all rights reserved. Any given book is probably just all rights reserved copyrighted. A open license is the Creative Commons, but not everything that is Creative Commons is open as we mean it for open source. And I'll get more to that in a little bit. But look for your attribution statements. My presentation has been littered in attribution statements. Down here, it says the difference between open license, public domains, and all rights reserved, who it's from, and what it is licensed under. This can be really helpful for identifying what bits are licensed from where. So fair use, open, and Creative Commons. There are other things other than the Creative Commons, as I mentioned before, that are open, and not all Creative Commons are open. So that no derivatives, if they can't remix your material, then it's not considered an OER. That's why that caveat is there for the Open Textbook Network or textbook library. So there are Creative Commons licenses that aren't open for the purposes of OER. There's a lot of folks who are like, well, if I see that CC, I can just trust it. And it's like, well, mostly. So keep that in mind. And when it comes to, oh, I'm scared of the Creative Commons, I highly, highly recommend going and checking out the Creative Commons FAQ. They highlight a bunch of fantastic questions like, how do you combine different licenses? And there's this double row of X's. If you have a Creative Commons license that says no derivatives, you can't combine it. Like you can take a public domain work and combine it with a CC BY or a CC share alike or a non-commercial. Like there's all these different parts. But part of why that non-derivative is not part of open in this thing is for this kind of matrix reason. So check that is explained more in depth by the Creative Commons on their FAQ, and there are a series of great questions answered there. What happens if I offer my material under a Creative Commons license and someone misuses them? What is it? What does that look like? What do you do? What are the remedies if you do not like how someone has used your open material? And how do you combine licenses? So that's all great. I am not a lawyer. Just fun fact. So attribution is the biggest part. You have to give appropriate credit, provide a link to the license, and indicate if changes were made. You may do so in any reasonable manner, but not in any way that suggests that the licensor endorses you or your use. So when I use a Creative Commons thing, when I give my attribution, I cannot suggest that the folks who made it before me know or approve of what I'm doing with it, which I think is kind of neat. I'm going to get more into that a bit. Now, here's the really important question. Do you like public domain poems? Do you like poems? What's your feel? Because this is part of how I think about open. Your children are not your children. I'm going to go ahead and quote this poem now. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. When you add your OER to an intellectual commons, into this open commons space, you can't control what happens there. You can't. There are some remedies, and if you look at the FAQ, you can find out about them, but you're adding to a conversation that is building. And in academia, that's pretty common. So I asked, do you like poems? And you told, and about 80% of you told me that you do like poems and you don't care if they are public domain or open poems. You just like poems. About 20% said you are morally opposed to poems. And I am glad I asked, for I was curious. So, unleashing the potential of OER. Your creation doesn't have to be perfect to perfectly serve someone else's needs. Others can work on an OER to make it better, and if you make a horrible OER and share it with the world, someone might be motivated by spite or frustration to create a replacement. So I am curious, have you shared or promoted an OER with the world? Let's get to the next slide. So sharing promotes innovation. I find this dog in a pineapple outfit very innovative. Your name stays on it, people remix it. Unfinished and incomplete works aren't as likely to languish, and people can notice and fix errors. This has been one of the interesting things about sharing our library published works with the world, is we get feedback where it's like, yeah, page 92, there's a typo, and it's like, oh, I can just fix that in the next edition. We can remix this, we can change it. I think it's pretty great. So what do you need to share an OER? Like, what is needed to share it? Well, first, you need an OER. It needs to be open. That's why I kind of meditated on that for a bit, concentrated a bit on it with our slides before. You need an open educational resource to share it. It needs to be hosted at an accessible URL, and it's best if it's in a portable format. So there are some OERs which exist as web pages. There are some OERs which are sadly trapped inside of learning management systems. It's really best if they're not. They need to be accessible by all. So I'm going to give the example again of our introduction to psychological statistics. When I look at this page, I added this work to the OER Commons. When I added it, I added this cover image, I added this title, I added the description, I added what subject it was in, who the audience was, what material type it is, the various authors, as has to do with attribution, when it was added, the licensing that is on the material, the language, and the media format. So that is what I had to input to promote this OER. So I asked you, have you shared or promoted an OER with the world? And of the 15 of you that answered, 13 said, yes, you've shared. 13% said, yes, you promoted. 60% said, no, I love mooching off the comments, which is a very legit choice. And some of you said that you're morally opposed to sharing and promoting OERs. I'm glad that you've admitted this at this conference. Odd, bold choice. When I added all of the information to this form, what I was doing was entering metadata. I love metadata. Do you already know what metadata is? I suspect with the number of librarians here, you do. Metadata is information about the thing and not the thing itself. It is providing points of access. It is increasing findability. So I work with metadata all the time. It is a core part of my job. I love this metadata is a love note to the future, because it really is, especially when you're looking at OER, because the metadata is how you share that rights information. It's one way you share that rights information. So remember back into the past, or imagine it. There was a time when we found information about information in a card catalog. The title, the author, a subject, some publishing information, who made it. These are kind of the, these are great points of access to understand where you find stuff. In this new era, we also have URLs, keywords, search engine optimization. You also want to know the format of your material. Judy Schmidt talked a bit about this in the formats you might have your materials in. Go check out her slides and stuff will be available. And I guess we're all going to be on YouTube. That'll be great fun. So URL of where it is hosted when you want to promote it. Keywords, SEO, search engine optimization, and know about your format. Portable formats preferable because it helps you share and distribute it. So findability. This is a big, big part of OERs, is how do you find it? How does it get into the hands of the self-learners, of the other professors, of the people who could really be served by this information? Well, It's great to have a great abstract or overview, a summary of it. What I would not give to have a summary button on my keyboard, just boop, summaries. I wish so hard. As it is, I will look to similar works. So like professionally published works or other OERs on the same topic to be like, okay, how do they describe what is psychological statistics? How is statistics described? How is this textbook described? The other place that can be very good for finding this summary information or finding a jumping off point is course descriptions and syllabus summaries. They can be really helpful for finding the words. So you judge a book by its metadata. Before you click in to read a whole textbook, you are going to look at the words used to describe it. You're also going to look at the picture. So Judy did a great one on design. Design is really important. The Introduction to Psychological Statistics, Judy did not make this cover. Judy also did not make this cover. This is my idea for the second edition's cover. Because we do judge our books by their covers. I don't know how many of you have encountered this. Ooh, I am curious. What do you think of summaries? I asked if you already knew what metadata was, and about 80% of you did, and the rest of you were like, I work with it all the time, didn't know it was called metadata, or who is metadata? I hope you have a better idea of what metadata is now. Data about the thing, not the thing itself. I find summaries very challenging because you're trying to just take a whole work and condense it. And it's not just condensing it in a dry way. Promotion is about getting it out there, getting it seen by the people it might serve, by the people who might be able to give it better, people who might be able to improve it, remix it, build on it. Because our OERs do not stand alone in conversation. So in this case, my proposed new cover, I'm very... I asked you guys about your summaries. Summaries are easy. Nobody said it's easy. 57% of you said that it's hard, that it is metadata, agreed. And somebody has this button on their keyboard, and that somebody, I am so jealous. I want that key. How do I get it? Do I have to get a new computer? Is that where the key comes from? So my next live poll is, I'm very curious, which cover do you prefer? Do you like the simple, plain words on a red background? Do you like this, my updated Introduction to Psychological Statistics? So I compiled, remixed this graphic out of two other graphics. They are a order statistics by someone on Wikimedia. They uploaded this GIF. That's the graph in the background. And then the planted leaves inside the mind is also from the Wikimedia Commons. I'm a big fan of Wikimedia Commons. So I can see in the discussion board that, yeah, summaries have to be just as attractive as the covers. I absolutely agree. Which cover is most accessible per WC3 guidelines? What's great is the alt text for this could just say the title. So I think they're both accessible. But I could be wrong. And if anyone else wants to speak to that, feel free. But great question. So I asked how you felt about the cover. A lot of you like the second cover. That's nice. It's good to hear. Some of you want anything else, and you are absolutely correct. I am not a designer. I don't really do graphic design, but I was not a big fan of just a red book. Although, when you are looking at how do people talk about their textbooks from a librarian point of view, we have a lot of people come up to the desk and say, hey, I need my statistics textbook. It's red. Is that going to be as easy for me to figure out what they're talking about as it has a head with plants in it? I don't know. So thank you for answering about the cover. And if you have any other comments on that, go ahead and address that in the discussion forum. And if you have any questions, toss them my way. I am nearing the end of my talk. I should have added, I'm not. Have folks heard of the 5 R's of OER? I decided not to really jump in on, I don't have a poll question for this. I have a million polls and I didn't have this one. So, anyone who doesn't love my cover needs to take a class in psychological statistics. I don't know if I agree, but I love the sentiment. So if I go back to my 5 R's of OER, retaining, reusing, revising, redistributing, and remixing. You can only do these things, really, if you have access to it, if you can get to the file, or to the files, or to the web page, whichever it is. To reuse it in your class, you still need to have it. To keep it, to retain it, you need to have that portable file. To revise it, having a file that is revisable can be incredibly powerful for encouraging an OER to keep being built upon. Remixing is part of being able to combine from different works. So a chapter from here, a chapter from there, remixing it into your new textbook, or just adding it as readings for your students, and redistribution. So I'm big on redistribution. As I said before, URL, the Institutional Repository Library at UMSL, has open works, which are already hosted other places. I am resharing those works, and it is in doing so, I am keeping a record of what, or a variant of a record of some OERs that have been used at UMSL, but I'm also sharing what has already been shared because I can, because I am allowed to. It is about redistributing the works you have. Share what is already shared, because the internet is kind of a wild place and stuff goes missing. There's a saying, lots of copies keep stuff safe. It helps keep it out there. Now, there is this question of, what about revision control? What if there's a new edition? What if these changes? That's part of why bundling your metadata into the product itself, having the information about the thing also in the thing, is really helpful. But the more places an OER can be found, the more students and teachers can find an OER. And that really serves all of us. So non-derivative licenses, yes, I absolutely agree. Non-derivative Creative Commons licenses only have 2 of the 5 Rs. So there's this question of well, why do I have this stuff that doesn't have all the Rs? Why would I want to include it? Well, a lot of times videos are kind of these standalone things that have a non-derivative license on them. A lot of TED Talks have non-derivative works because they don't want you to chop it up into little bits, which is fair. You can kind of change the meaning of something by decontextualizing it, but it can be very worthwhile to have your students go watch a very cool TED Talk that's under a Creative Commons license, but it's not an OER because it can't be remixed, because it doesn't follow all of the Rs. So that's something I'm quite, I really want, so which of the Rs can an OER provide if that OER is not shared? You can still, if it's behind, if it's inside of an LMS, it can still be used in that class, but they have to log in to get to it. They have to pay tuition to use it. If it's trapped in an LMS, it's really hard to retain it. It's incredibly hard to export out of an LMS and into another thing. So retaining it, keeping your copy of it gets really hard. Revising it gets really hard. Redistributing it, sharing it with folks outside of the LMS is incredibly difficult. And remixing it outside of the LMS is it's just really hard. So if you can't find the OER, what of the R's can be done without the open educational resource? So this was my presentation. You can find the slides at works.bpress.com/LenaMarvin/23. That's also somewhere up high in the discussion board. And I am ready for questions if you are ready to ask them. I can also dive in a little deeper on a variety of the tools that I talked about. I'm going to jump outwards into my presentation mode, because the main places I talked about were the OER Commons, the Open Textbook Library, and the Internet Archive. The OER Commons has limited hosting, but fantastic share promotion tools. And it's really good for little modules that you only need to do a little editing on. Like if you had a small module that you wanted to share, you can just get it into the OER Commons, get it online, working quick. The Open Textbook Library is a referatory, so you can't upload anything there. And the Internet Archive is a bit of a beast to get a feel for. But for both the OER Commons and the Internet Archive, you only need an account to sign up with. And those are free. I love the Internet Archive. Should I just jump over there and play some video games now? Because we could just show that off. It's very cool.
Thank you very much, Lena, for this wonderful talk. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask our presenter? How can GitHub be used for OER?
GitHub is super cool. I've been working on it. I've been working on a project in GitHub. It is, there's a variety. So since you can still see my thing, I'm going to look up Jupyter Books. Or now you can see my thing. Cool. So Jupyter Books is a collaboration markdown, like make a book. I can't get it to work. I'm working on it. I'm going to get there. But I love it. So these are some examples of books that live in GitHub and can be used as textbooks. So which one do folks want me to click on? Statistics and data science, earth and environmental data science, computational interference. Do any of these look interesting? Oh, yeah, so I'll just show off learning, solving partial differential equations. I haven't looked at this. I don't know what's in there. I'm going to just go for it. The website looks like, so the website looks like this is a textbook hosted. It says github.io up here, so you can see that like this is a textbook. You can get to various parts of it and learn about higher order differential equations, but it's made inside of GitHub. So all of the parts that built the book are inside of notebooks, and it's like arranged like this, which is super cool. Can we have a link to the page with the books? Sure. It's all at, if you go to executablebooks.org, part of the idea is that you can have like live code living in there. So I'm going to go ahead and just drop that link in your chat. Yeah, so the features to include in your OER, that it's helpful to read reviews about similar OERs to what others wish for. It's, when you're making an OER, consider what people need, what you need as a professor, what other people need, and looking at other people's OERs, you can be like, oh, cool, you included this, you included that, that's really cool. to be clear, with these executable books that are inside of GitHub, I haven't figured this out yet. Like I can't get the pretty part. I'm getting the content in, but I'm working on that last step. But GitHub is an amazing tool for software development to a large extent, but there are documentation things in there, and it's got a revision history part that gets really interesting. So let me see if I can find, so folks can add, so you can see that 2 people have added little like issues to this book. So these are different users who are saying, hey, I found this, I found that. Yeah, it's got cool options in it. GitHub's really neat. I'm getting to know it. Part of what's neat is that you can see your revision history, see how it changed over time, and make branches. So if I built a calculus textbook or a statistics textbook in this, and people have, like if I click back here, there is a statistics and data science. There's also a psychological one in here somewhere. There's a number of books, and they're very cool. They've got neat, intro to cultural analytics. Sure, I'm gonna go look at that. So you can see the book, and you can also download it as a PDF, and this lets you like run code in it. In theory, it could be used as a substitute for the Open Educational Resources Commons or Pressbooks, but I can't get it to work. I'm hopeful. Clearly, other people have gotten it to work. Being able to print a PDF and being able to look at it on GitHub, I find this really exciting.
Lena, do you think that it's because the GitHub was originally designed as a software development tool, and so the things that it does right now are really optimized around developing pieces of software, or as opposed to developing textbooks, for example?
Yeah, so I think for most users, Pressbooks is going to be a better option. Pressbooks has a lot more. Pressbooks has a lot more going on than the Open Educational Resource Commons. And to get all of this done, you have to learn Markdown, which is real tricky, but not that bad. I recommend it. I say check it out, see how it looks. One of the other questions, I want to talk about reviews and the strength of reviews in promotion and sharing. So if I go to the OER Commons, if I'm in here, and I'm going to go live just because I can, what am I looking for? I'm looking for statistics. Maybe I spelled that right. We'll see. If I go looking for something in here, everything that pops up because of metadata. Probability and statistics, an ebook, you can see when it was added. So if you're like, 2007, this might be a little crunchy. I don't know, has statistics changed that much? Probably. So you can look at the various things in here. And you, on the left-hand side, this is a faceted search, so I can say what sort of material I'm looking for. So if I say I'm looking for a not material type, there we go. I want a whole textbook. Let's see if the one I added pops up, or the one from UMSL. So that's the introductory. I'm probably, here we are, an introduction to psychological statistics. The summary abstract for this book, what I used was this beautiful letter that the professor who wrote this included in it, where, we're bombarded by information. How do we understand statistics? I included that it came from the Affordable and Open Educational thing. Down at the bottom, I've got 2 comments here that I can look for and say, what are the reviews of this OER? How can I use these reviews to improve it? And if I look at the Open Ooh, I can see all endorsed resources from them. Neat. I really like the open textbook library. So let's see. But looking at other similar works' reviews, you can start to see what people might be looking for. Visually appealing, graphs and charts, text is clear and easy to read, distinct chapters and subheadings, all stuff that Judy talked about in her things. Let's see what else. So do you have any other questions?
Anyone have any other questions for our speaker?
Oh, I wonder if I have one more poll. I think I might. Here we go. This incredibly important poll. Are you going to? No, you answered that one. I think no, you haven't answered yet. Are you going to share and promote OERs? I'm very interested to know if you intend to. Is there an index with all open textbooks listed in it? No, the internet is insane. There's stuff everywhere. I really like the open textbook library if you're looking for textbooks specifically, because it has a lot of review built into it. But if you're looking at like, what are open textbooks, where do I find them? OER Commons also has that little tool for changing your search to be only of textbooks, but there is no index of all open textbooks because the internet is a big place with a lot of open materials. But very good question. And let's go back to that poll. A bunch of you are already, so I said, are you going to share and promote OERs? And I only gave you the option of yes. I gave no option of no. Okay, I gave yes, but really no. And nobody clicked it. So of the 10 of you that voted, yes, you already do, 30%, 50, yes, and you'll do more, fantastic, and yes, that's really what I wanted to hear from you. And then the most important poll of polls, did I use too many polls? Please let me know in the poll. I'm very curious. This is the first time I've gotten to use a software that allowed me to ask so many polls. So I figured I'd go ahead and ask. So it helped keep me engaged. And sometimes that's what's important. Yeah, there's really no index of all open textbooks. I found that the open textbooks that I linked to from the Executable Books project, those were books that I had not seen before. And I just, they aren't necessarily in other repositories. They're not in referatories because these books, all of these are specifically made for running code in addition to Markdown. That's why it's so crunchy, or at least I think so, why it's kind of hard to use, is the idea is inside of the notebooks themselves, you can click to get other things. And yes, Judy, I agree. If you need help finding OERs, check with some librarians. We're very good at finding things, and there's so many resources and so many places to look. I really like the OER Commons. I really like archive.org. Depending on your subject area, there's also all of the public domain. I feel like the public domain is just such an amazing tool, but knowing is the stuff I want to use in the public domain? Where's the public domain at now? These are great questions for your librarians.
Well, thank you again, Lena, for a wonderful talk. Thank you, attendees, very much for attending this session. Please provide your feedback on this session through the short 3-question survey that will pop up for you at the end of the session. The next sessions are at 2:30. They are titled Gathering at the Table, How to Build Your Team for A&OER Campus Success, and Grassroots OER, Advocating for an OER Repository for English Language Teaching and Learning. During this break, we encourage you to check out the Meeting Hub and connect with other attendees. To leave this session, you can click the Back to Timeline link on the top left-hand corner of the portal. Again, thank you, Lena, and thank you all for attending this session.